Welcome back to the shop. Did a lot of painting this summer, had some restoration projects, one of them being a 60 pane bay window, all of which needed to be reglazed and repainted. And then I had some windows replaced, which required a lot of work, like prep work from me before the window guys came. So I thought I'd talk about some of the products that I used, some of the processes, and some of the tools. So we'll go ahead and get started with the big pane window. The first step in that project was really finding a good glaze. So I talked about this a little bit on Instagram, and I got a message from Period Craftsman, and he mentioned this glaze from Sarco. This is something you can't buy in the home store. So I would, if you've got a project like this, look into this. It's not cheap. I think this bucket was about $65. I used just about all of it. Anything that was remaining, I ended up putting into a smaller container so it wouldn't dry up. So the process with reglazing the window started with removing the old glazing, using any type of tool that worked for the project. Sometimes you could just pull it out with your finger. Other times I used a chisel and a hammer, trying to be careful to not break any of the window panes, which I did break, I think, about 3. Some of them had a little bit of a crack already. But anyway, that's not too bad. Out of 60, I broke 3. And then you simply have the glass cut at the hardware store and replace it. So once you get all of the glazing out, the glazing that will come out, if it doesn't want to come out, just leave it and work around it. But you just try to get all the loose stuff out. Once you do that, you want to hit everything with a piece of sandpaper. I use a combination of 80 grit and 120 grit. And then you're ready for primer. Now this is important. You need to use an oil-based primer. Otherwise, the wood will suck the oil out of the glazing and the glazing will fail over time. So you want to use an oil-based primer. I used the Zinsser Cover Stain. It dries fast. It's really easy to work with. And just one coat is all you need. Once I did that, then I was ready for the glazing. This is kind of a bit of a learning curve. So if you've never glazed a window before, figure out a way to practice, get a little practice in. You're going to get better as you go. This was a nice product to use because it was just easier to get smooth than some of the other products that you'll find at your home store or your hardware store. After I finished glazing the bay window, I primed the window with, actually I waited 2 weeks for the glazing to kind of skin over. This is a little test piece here. Once it skinned over, I primed it with the Benjamin Moore. This is a fresh start. This is a water cleanup. It's an acrylic paint. I use this as a primer on almost all of my projects. And basically just primed the window. And then for my finish coat, I used the Benjamin Moore More Glow. And I always use, it's a good idea to pick one color and try to stick with it. So for my house, all of my exterior trim is Dove White. So that way, if I'm touching up something, I don't have to look for more paint. So I always use Dove White semi-gloss. I only put one coat of finish on the bay window because I do want to add another coat going into the fall, because this stuff really does take a long time to set up. So I didn't want to fool around with it too much. After putting the first coat of the More Glow, I waited a day, went around with a razor blade and kind of cut the paint by the glazing line and then scraped it away and removed it. So it looks good, but I want to get one more coat on, but I just want the glaze to set up a little bit longer. So that was the bay window, big project. I do have a brick house, and after doing the painting, I did use the big stretch caulk by Sashko and put tape down on the brick, got a nice bead, and then pulled the tape up. It's kind of hard caulking around brick. I found that to be a pretty good method. Moving on to the windows that I had replaced, I did end up having Anderson replace these 4 windows. It's a little pricey. I think next time I'm just going to do it on my own. But I kind of needed that kick in the butt to get the project started because there was a lot of prep work before they even came out. The old window frames were covered with aluminum and they just looked really horrible. So to get ready for the guys to bring the windows out, I removed the old windows. And after removing the old windows, I also removed all the aluminum trim that the original trim on the house was covered with. It was in relatively good shape. They did remove the bed molding around the top of the window where it connects to the soffit, and that was easy enough to replace. I was able to go to Lowe's and just pick up some bed molding and retrim that part. There was a little bit of rot on one of the casings at the bottom where it meets the sill, and so we'll get into that first. Where the rot was, I dug out all of the rotted wood. It was dry because I have a pretty large soffit, so the material around the windows does stay pretty dry, and we haven't had rain here that much this summer. So I dug out all of the soft wood. It was only a hole about maybe 1.25 inches by 2 inches, 3 inches, but still a pretty significant repair that you wouldn't want to just use regular wood putty for. So after digging that out, I used some epoxy. I ended up using Total Boat because I had it here in the shop, but you could use any epoxy. The thing with the epoxy is it will suck into the dry rot wood. So it's almost like a sponge. You just mix up that epoxy, brush it in there with a small brush, and the dry wood will just soak that epoxy up. And instead of it being soft now, you've got a good hard foundation. And to fill that large hole, I like to use Bondo. So this is Auto Body Bondo. This is a 2-part deal where you've got the Bondo and the hardener. Mix it up. Be careful because if you use too much hardener, it does dry really fast. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. But it's relatively easy to work with. It does dry fast and it sands very easily. And it's been known by a lot of people in the trades to be a good filler for large gaps. So after that was done, cleaned up all the rest of the millwork, sanding it. Some areas I sanded it a little bit heavier using the orbital sander just to get some of that loose paint off. Tools that I would use for painting would be a wire brush, or prepping I should say, would be a wire brush, a chisel, a scraper. I did end up having to use a cat's paw since this was covered with aluminum. There were a few aluminum nails that I had to remove. A nail set, because any nails that I couldn't remove, I sunk into the trim a little bit further. And then once all that was done, then I used the Ready Patch for the wood fill. Ready Patch is a great wood fill. I've been using it for decades now. It's an oil-based wood fill, so it's great for exterior use. It dries relatively quickly and it sands very easily. So after getting all the holes, all the imperfections sealed or filled with the Ready Patch, sanded everything, and again went back to the Fresh Start by Benjamin Moore. That's my go-to primer for interior and exterior projects. And then the finish coat was 2 coats of the Moore Glow. The reason why I wanted to take the windows out and do all this prep work for the window guys is, number one, I knew if I was depending on them to remove the aluminum, they weren't going to do it the way I wanted it done. You can't expect that. It took a long time to remove the aluminum, do all the prep work, and have all the exterior trim work look the way I wanted it to look. Also, it's a very old house, and when these replacement windows were put in, I've always known that they weren't done in the best fashion. There was just a ton of silicone. So when I removed the old window stops to take the old windows out, they literally came out in like 2 and 3 inch pieces. It wasn't like pulling out a piece of molding, in like one piece, because it had been glued in. So it took a lot of time, took a lot of prep to get everything clean, so when the window guys came, they could just go ahead, put those windows in place. The outside is already painted. Doing a project like this, you don't want to go through all the effort and work and end up using the wrong products. And so again, another shout out to Period Craftsman, because this was a big help. Glazing windows is a bit of an art form, and using the right product is going to make the project that much easier. All these other products that I've mentioned, I have history with them. This is just what I've been using. And, you know, there's no substitute for sort of time tested. I guess that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. We'll be getting back into the woodworking at the end of the summer with another woodworking project. 2 reminders, I'm now on a podcast. Every Friday morning it comes out. It's the American Craftsman Podcast with Jeff from Green Street Joinery. And if you didn't know, I have a second channel with Jeff from Green Street Joinery called Today's Craftsman. So I hope that you'll check out both of those things. I'll have links to them down below. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.